All right, now we are ready to put our die cuts onto our card front. So the very first step, and I've got all my pieces pre-cut. This particular die, like I said, has a lot of different pieces and they layer together, which makes a really beautiful result, but it does take a few minutes to do your die cutting. So rather than you watch me die cut things, I figured I would have it all pre-done. So I'm gonna do my candle first. So there's a little wax piece that goes on top of the candle base. And the nice thing about these dies is there's a little indent right on the bottom piece, so it shows you exactly where the upper pieces lay, which makes it super, super easy. For tiny pieces like this, it's quite handy to have a piece of tweezers, so you can hold it. That way your fingertip is not covering a whole bunch of, covering a bunch of the die where you want to place the adhesive. And if you happen to not place it correctly, you can use your tweezers or your fingers to move that around. There we go. So I'm going to leave the candle like this. You could, if you want, put some glossy accents on that candle wax or even the flame or whatever. It gives it a nice contrast of texture, but just for time, I decided not to do it here, because if you did it on here, you would need to wait for it to completely dry, and sometimes it takes a few hours for it to dry depending on how thick you get it before you could put the other pieces on top of the front, on top of it. Otherwise you're going to mess up your glossy accents. But if you happen to be doing a lot of these cards or similar cards or whatever, it's really easy to die cut a bunch, do the glossy accents for a bunch, and have them drying while you're doing other pieces. All right, so our candle is on there. We are ready to do our lantern. So because these dies have several different layers to them, typically you're going to choose different shades of the same color cardstock. So you'll see on the one that I'm gluing together, I'm going from dark to light on the lantern. On my sample, I went from light to dark. So my lightest piece was in the back, and then I have darker pieces coming in the front. And it's going to be kind of like a puzzle. Because we already have that lantern cut out of there, we're just piecing our puzzle together, layering things on top. And again, because it has that indent showing you exactly where the pieces go, you don't have to guess where they're supposed to go. I can see this flipping up right there, so I may have to go back later and add some adhesive to it, but I'm going to wait for it to dry first. The thing with vellum, and especially die cuts that you're gluing right onto vellum, it doesn't like liquid adhesive. It doesn't like liquids of any kind. So stickles, glossy accents, adhesive, they tend, if you use it too much or are too heavy with it, they tend to make your vellum buckle. So when I'm gluing something to my vellum, I try to be as minimal as possible when it comes to the adhesive. Last piece for the lantern here. There we go. And the cardstock colors I used were a little bit different between the two cards simply because I'm using scraps. That's the great thing about die cuts, especially ones that piece together like this, is they're a perfect way to use up some scraps. So this one is dark or light to dark from back to front, and this one is dark to light. So you just see the difference between the two there. I kind of thought this looked a little bit plain, so I die cut some greenery from this set here. I love all the different variations for holiday greens that it has. So it's nice and easy to pick your favorites. So I've got them pre-cut. I'm just going to put the greens down. And once again, I don't make sure there's adhesive over everything, especially when it comes to greenery or natural things. I kind of think some of those pieces flipping up makes it look a little bit more natural because it's not completely flat. And sometimes you have to hold your piece down for a second while the glue dries. So the last step, I've got these berries here, but I think it would look a little bit odd to have berries with red stems. So here's what I do. I take my die cut and I take a Copic marker because I'm going to add some gloss or some stickles to the front. Sometimes when I'm doing berries, I'll do glossy accents so I have shiny red berries, but for this one I wanted a little bit of sparkle. And I'm taking a brown Copic and I'm just coloring those stems. There's a few leaves in there that I'm coloring. You wouldn't want to color them green because green and red make brown anyways, so I'm just coloring them brown. There's so few in there that I don't think it really matters. And then you can color this one too, but I happen to know that it's a little bit too long, so I'll be cutting or ripping that part off anyways. You can cut it if you want, but to me, when you rip it, you don't necessarily notice. For something that's that fine, it's not going to matter. So once again, I'm putting glue on my die cut. I'm just putting it where I want it to be on the card here. While that's drying for a second, I'll put the lid back on my glue. And then, like I said, if you wanted, you could put some glossy accents here. If you put glossy accents on your candle, then I would suggest not, because it's the same texture, then the stickles will look better. But if you hadn't done that and you left it flat, you could put glossy accents on here. But I'm going to put a little bit of the red glitter just because I've put some of the red glitter on the other cards in this set. And super easy to just put it on the berries, and then you need to leave it to dry. So there we go. And then once it's dry, it will decrease in, like it won't be quite as puffy. It'll flatten a little bit, but then you'll have some sparkle in your berries. So there we are, our third card is done.